Welcome to IN Live for the InnovationNetwork.guru. I'm Gilmore, your network host. It's a pleasure to be with you. We're so excited today because today we have a business thought leader. We have Joe Pine with us. He's a serial author, a serial speaker. He is a thought leader for business, and he consults to Fortune 500s with his company that he holds with his partner, Jim Gilmore, and it's called Strategic Horizons. And he has written so many articles and so many books that I am just going to highlight a few because they're going to set the context for what we're looking at today and what we're going to be talking about and exploring. So one of the things that he's most famous for and really has sort of established him on the scene of the business economy. And in fact, the Financial Times awarded him one of the top 7 important business books several years in a row. It's called The Experience Economy, and it is work is theater, and every business a stage. So that already tells you the context of how he's thinking. And he and his partner recently republished the book and updated it. So we're going to be exploring that. He also wrote and co-wrote Infinite Possibility, Creating Customer Unique Value in the Digital Frontier. He did this with Kim Korn of Creative Advantage. And we're going to explore that because he's literally adding another dimension and extending the dimension of the experience economy. We're going to be talking about that. And also he and Jim are both the producers of Think About, which is a yearly experience which brings together thought leaders and business leaders from around the world to think about what is going to happen next with regard to business. So Joe, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Gilmore. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Joe, just to start us off, give us the context of the experience economy, what it means, and I'd love you to say sort of what it meant in the late 1990s when you first came up with this concept, and now that you've updated the book, what is your newest thinking around this?
Right, it's amazing how long it's actually been. Is that I first hit upon the concept in late 1993 or 94 from my book Mass Customization, where I realized that mass customizing a good automatically turns into a service. And when asked, what does mass customization turn a service into? I said it automatically turns it into an experience. And so ever since then, I've been working on it. My partner, Jim Gilmore, we wrote the book. It came out in 1999. And back then, the cusp of the 21st century, there weren't nearly as many examples of what's going on in this shift beyond goods and services to experiences. We laid out the basic case that we've gone from an agrarian economy based off commodities to an industrial economy based off the goods to a service economy. And then we talked about the nascent experience economy. When we came out with the updated edition in 2011, we said clearly now we are in an experience economy. In today's experience economy, goods and services are no longer enough. They're everywhere becoming commoditized. And what consumers and actually increasingly business people as well want are experiences, which are memorable events that engage each person in an inherently personal way.
So one of the things that you described in one of your books is also how companies and organizations, which I would think mundane, apologies for that, such as industrial equipment, have been taking that concept. I don't want to explore that concept a little bit further, but have taken that concept and actually even adopted it. So can you give us an example to make what you're talking about tangible, both from a consumer level, which I can come up with some ideas, but I want you to feed them. And also from, again, this sort of industrial equipment. My God, how do you make that exciting from an experiential perspective?
Right. Well, on the consumer side, you see the rise of theme parks, of theme restaurants, of experiential retail, including, the Apple stores, American Girl cafes, Build-A-Bear workshops, and so forth. You see the rise in the whole hotel industry of boutique hotels. And so across every industry, you can basically see where people increasingly value the time that they spend with companies when companies help that be time well spent. And even in banking, you see the rise of like the ING Direct cafes that are now bought by Cap One, so they're Capital One 360 cafes, where you go in, have a cup of coffee, actually pay for it in there. And then you have a conversation with the barista that wants you to, convert your funds over into savings accounts for them. So you even see it in industries that you never really thought possible, including things like industrial equipment and that. My favorite example of a B2B experience is actually the Case Tomahawk Experience Center in the Northwoods of Wisconsin. So this is Case Construction created this huge place. It's basically like a giant sandbox where they bring customers up to be able to try out the equipment there. And they have the bulldozers, the front loaders, all of the different skidders and so forth that they have. And they then have rodeos and contests who can move the most amount of dirt in the shortest amount of time. And Case did a study a number of years ago where a customer comes up to a potential dealer of theirs. They have perhaps a 20% chance of getting the business, but they bring them up to Tomahawk and it goes up to 80%. And the basic reasoning for that, whether it's consumer or business company, is that in today's experience economy, the experience is the marketing. The best way to generate demand for any offering is with an experience so engaging that customers can't help but spend time with you, give you their attention, and then pay up by buying your offering as well. And that's why you see experiential retail like an REI, which has an admission fee experience of climbing a 55-foot mountain inside of the store to get you to try out the mountain climbing equipment that they have.
And so it sounds like this is actually combining a number of different things. When we talk experience, the elements perhaps of experience are emotional connection, storytelling, another topic that you've written another book on, authenticity. What do you see? Is that correct? And what do you see are the elements that create an engaging experience that we as companies should be thinking about?
Yeah, all of those are very important elements. The storytelling relates to the theater, and again, the subtitle of the first edition of the book was "Work is Theater, and Every Business is Stage." And when you're in the business of staging experiences, your work is theater. You need to understand that whenever you're in front of customers, you are on stage, you're acting, and you need to act in a way that engages the audience. And that also means you need to come up with an experience that has a level of dramatic structure to it, that builds and rises up to a climax and then comes back down again. You do need also, one thing you didn't mention is in fact very important is theming. And theming tends to get, for some people, a bad name because of theme parks where it's all about fantasy, or theme restaurants where it's just so much in your face in that. But in fact, theming is simply the theme is the organizing principle for the experience. It allows you to decide what's in the experience versus what's out of the experience. And a great theme can really pull everything together and create a very cohesive experience. My favorite example of that is actually a boutique hotel, the Library Hotel in New York City, that is themed after Dewey Decimal System. Right, that's the theme, Dewey Decimal System. So you walk into the Library Hotel. Behind the counter at registration is, in fact, a card catalog. You get little bookmarks. Your key packet is a saying of a book of little sayings of libraries, and then every floor is a different classification in the Dewey Decimal System. So there's a social sciences floor, physical sciences floor, mathematics, literature, and so on. And then every room is a different sub-classification. So when you go to your room, it's filled with books and with artwork that's inspired by that classification. And one of the beauties of it is that in this boutique hotel with 10 floors, 6 rooms in every floor, is how many times you have to go to be able to experience it all. And that's what the power of a theme can really bring to it.
And do people keep on coming back? I mean, I know that I would just sort of sit, and I wouldn't even visit the rest of Manhattan. I would just sit in the room, right, pulling all the books and looking at everything.
Exactly. The breakfast nook is just wall-to-wall bookcases. There's books from every different room. And they sort of move around and make their way in that. And yeah, there have been people that come many times. If you love books, I've been there probably 10 times myself. It's just a great place to be. If you do go, I recommend that you get room 300.003. Right, 300.003 is the economics room. So there's always one particular book that you're going to encounter in there.
Just one. So when we are talking now about the experience economy, and maybe you touched on it, but if you don't mind elaborating, what did you see then and what are you seeing now, just with regard to the experience economy, that you realize, we really need to update this book because we're seeing a significant change here?
Well, it's interesting is that all of the frameworks in the book are still there. Is that the core concepts, everything is as valid today as it was over 15 years ago when I originally wrote it, because Jim and I are not talking about a fad. right? It's about a fundamental change in the very fabric of the economy. So what needed updated most was examples, that there are so many new examples that have been out there. There are some things. We added a framework on dramatic structure that I just talked about. We added a framework on charging admission too, because that's one of the things is that, back in the 1990s, we said just logically an experience is it means you're charging admission. You'd never imagine going to a movie or a play or a concert and not pay an admission fee. So we were sort of more predicting that you would see more and more companies that would be charging admission for the experience in places where you didn't think possible, and that has come about. And we got scores of examples of now. Even before the first book came out is when the first American Girl place opened up just off of Michigan Avenue in Chicago, where in this doll store they had a live theater with a stage production that they charged over $30 for. They had a cafe where they're charging admission, not for individual item, is that it's a whole a admission fee for the entire grown-up dining experience. And they have a hair salon and a photo shoot, all of these admission fee experiences. Now you can point to many restaurants that are charging admission for the experience, like Next in Chicago, where you have to get online and get a reservation, which means also the restaurant gets the money in advance, right? And doesn't have to worry about a cancellation because they've already got your money. And then when you get there, the meal is free. It's subsumed within the admission fee experience with, of course, wine or cocktails extra. There are cafes, there's one I know of in London, that rather than charge for the coffee is charge an admission fee for the time that you spend there, and then the coffee comes free with it. And you see more and more of these sorts of things happening as we've more fully shifted into an experience economy. And then the other big thing that, of course, has come about in the 15 years since we first wrote the book is the rise of digital technology. The fact that now it wasn't, back then it was just about the internet. Now it's about the smartphone, it's about the Oculus Rift, it's about Fitbits and wearable technology. It's all the different ways that you can use technology today. And that's why I wrote the book, Infinite Possibility. And there it has a core framework about how do we innovate in experiences using digital technology and basically embrace that technology to create experiences that fuse the real and the virtual. And that's what we can now see happening more and more.
And so that really brings to life, I think, a couple of concepts that you have. One is mass customization, which originally seemed to be an oxymoron, but now is absolutely possible, as well as a requirement in today's economy, and everyone's talking about it. And let's talk about that a little bit first, because I think one of the things that people think about, especially with the advent of 3D printing and IoT and wearables, that mass customization is necessary, and yet some companies, I think, still think that, it's still expensive. We can't afford it. We don't know how to do that for our product. What would you say are some questions of ways or ways of thinking for these companies so they can start translating and seeing the value of mass customization for themselves, as well as the actual ability to implement it without necessarily breaking the bank? What would you suggest for them?
Well, first to recognize that mass customization is, in fact, the antidote to commoditization. That you can't help but be differentiated, right? And commodity means simply you're undifferentiated. You can't help but be differentiated if you're working with each individual customer, if you're customizing to that individual customer. And so that's why mass customization is the route up what we call this progression of economic value from commodities, goods, services, and then to experiences. And the mass is important. It's not that we just want to give everybody what they want, pander to what they're doing, no matter what the costs are. You need to have this co-equal imperatives, providing what each individual customer wants, but then doing it with low cost, with high volume and efficient operations. And there are two keys to that. And the first key has always been apparent to me, and that's modularity. You think about modularity, think about Lego building bricks. I mean, what can you build with Legos? Anything you want, right? Absolutely. Because of the large number of modules, different sizes, different shapes, different colors, and the simple and elegant linkage system to snapping them together. And that's what modularity is, modules plus linkage system. So if you modularize your product, then you simply do different things for different customers by picking different parts out of the bin. If you modularize your processes, your service activities, Then you're linking together different activities that you do. You can even modularize experiences, different experiences that a customer must undergo that you can bring together on an individual basis. You see now that that Disney has the magic band that they wear around the wrists of guests in the Walt Disney World theme park, and that now allows them for the first time to individually know where every customer is, and at least the customers that are using this, and be able to address them individually, start to customize the experience for them. And the second thing that relates again to the work in infinite possibility that wasn't as clear to me when I first wrote the book Mass Customization, that was back in 1993 to date myself, is the rise of digitization. Because anything you can digitize, you can customize. There's actually nothing, because there's nothing more modular than digital technology. Once it enters the realm of zeros and ones, you can instantaneously change a 0 to a 1 and vice versa. So if you digitize your product, then you can address each customer individually and put together that product in different ways. You know, many industries have digital, you know, the smartphones are unremittingly unique. They may come out the manufacturing line is pretty much identical, but because of the digital technology in them, we add our own apps, we add our own contact list, we add our own movies and songs and so forth, and they become unremittingly unique to us as individuals, and that's the power of digitization.
So let's take a look at that old famous quote by Ford, who said, you know, if I had asked my customers what they wanted, they would have told me a faster horse. And so it's wonderful to be asking your consumers, your customers, your clients what they want, and that's really important. And at the same time, we have the Model T Ford, we have these breakthrough things, we have the iPod. And you know what? These geniuses did not ask their consumer, and yet they were fundamentally aware of what the consumer needed. So how do you do that? What is that conversation that you have with your customer in order to get that kind of data?
Well, I think that you need to talk with customers not about what they want, but about what their needs are. What are the jobs they need to get done in Clayton Christensen terms, I think is a very good way to think about it. And one of the concepts that we talk about in the experience economy is customer sacrifice. And sacrifice as opposed to satisfaction. You know, satisfaction is relative to your expectations, and that's where you get faster horses, because that's the dimension on which we think. But sacrifice is instead relative to what do they really truly want and need. And if you forget about their expectations and try and figure out what do they really truly want and need, and the sacrifice is the gap between that need and what they have to settle for today. And the question is, how do you then close that gap? It's often difficult for customers to even think about that. And so one of the questions we've come up with is, like, if you could wave a magic wand, right, and get anything that you wanted, you know, what might that be? But the other thing you can do is do ethnographic research to actually observe your customers in situ, if you will, where they live and how they're doing things, and then be able to think on their behalf, to be able to understand their needs and what they're trying to do, and now envision what the possibilities might be for them, and then you can innovate in new ways for them.
Wonderful. And I think another aspect of this, particularly with the digitization, is that we're talking about big data. We're talking about massive amounts of data. And one of the things that I hear about repeatedly from companies is, oh my God, I have so much data. One, I don't know how to process it. I don't know how to think strategically about it. I don't know how to really make use of it. I've got sheets of information and I'm not taking advantage. There's money lying on the floor or sitting on the table. I'm not getting to it. What are some ways that companies can make use of this big data in a thoughtful process that would lead them to, in fact, those great breakthroughs from a product and service perspective?
Right. There can be ways of being able to look at all the data that you have and be able to think about how it might create new value. And one of the ways is to start to look at the dimensions along which your customers differ, right? Dimensions of sacrifice. And if you can see where, you think about the classic bell curve, is that where there's a few outliers in either end and then it rises up in the middle where the average is. Well, is there some dimension amongst all that data where you can find where, in fact, the bell curve is rather flat, right? It doesn't rise up. But there's a lot of difference between customers and what. Search for those types of things where then being able to customize all along up and down that curve can be of great value to your customers. You also want to look at dimensions on which at least certain customers really feel strongly, that they really care about this, that this is something. One of the examples I often use in speeches and workshops with companies is a shower. Because a shower is replete with sacrifice. A shower is a very individual thing. We all want it individually, but it has all of these different dimensions of at least potential sacrifice, beginning with temperature. If it's not exactly the right temperature and we all differ in where that is, that's something everybody feels strongly about. So you've got to be able to find a mechanism to get to the right temperature, get the shower to keep that temperature. But then you start to ask, and I've often done in workshops, is what other dimensions that you see, and people will often come up with 20, 30, even more dimensions of sacrifice around a shower. And that's where you can start to then, okay, if I've got different modules for each one of these, if I can find a dimension that nobody else has discovered, then I can innovate something that's new. A classic example with the shower I often point to is not one that's customized, that basically everybody likes. And I heard, I've never verified this, but I heard that this was that the inventor of this, the innovator, was in fact like a housekeeper at a low end, Motel 6 type place, and that's simply the curved shower curtain, right? One of the ways that we sacrifice is we're in this small enclosure, and as we start to move around the shower, we start to feel that shower curtain on it. We're sort of like struggling with it. Nobody likes that feeling. And simply curving the shower curtain, right? Same exact place otherwise, but curving it out so now we're pulling the shower curtain away from us. Feels like, well, it's much more open. We aren't encountering it on our arms and our legs and that sort of thing. And it's a small thing, but it's in fact a very powerful innovation that has made a small difference for millions of people.
I love it. And let's talk about, that's really a physical extension of 3D. You talk a lot about 3D and three-dimensionalization and the fusion, dimensionalization, excuse me, of the experience economy, and also then the fusion between the real and the virtual. Can you explain that? I think that we could use some examples about that as well for the look at that.
Right. The core framework in the book, the infinite possibility, is what I call this multiverse, because it does extend, as you say, the dimensions of the known universe. All of our experiences happen in this known universe of time, space, and matter. That I am right now in a particular place in time at this moment, in this particular place, my office, right, with the matter of the desk and the TV screen and the camera that I have here and that. But also then what's going on is that we are having a virtual experience at the same time, right? Is that you have you're being shown on a screen, right? Mediated by a screen, each one of us. The people that are watching online are seeing this at the same time, but also virtually. So there is this fusion of the real and the virtual, where we're here really in this experience, you in your place, me in my place, but then a virtual connection that has been created that really goes from space to no space, from a real place to a virtual place. You add in the fact that many people are watching this not live, but are going to come back later and watch it on there, and then you extend time, that we're having a time in a simultaneous time, but then they're going to watch it asynchronous to that, and maybe even be able to put comments in that, and it gets a stream going. And so you can play with all these dimensions. You can go from space to no space, from real places to virtual places. You can go from matter to no matter, from atoms to bits, from material substances to digital substances. You can go from time to no time. You can go from actual events that unspool before us moment by moment by moment, to ways of getting autonomous to that, to experiencing the past, to envisioning the future, to hyperlinking time like you can with Facebook and LinkedIn and so forth. And so that's what the multiverse does, is it extends this out and recognizes that we have these 6 different experience design variables, both ends of these 3 dimensions of the universe, that we can now play with. So we can do things like create augmented reality, like drop into virtual reality and so forth. And that's increasingly going to happen now and into the future.
And that's what I was just gonna, you just picked it up. I was just gonna ask you, you must be so excited about all the different kind of wearable devices, about the developments of IoT, about augmented and VR and Oculus VR. Do you think that we are going to naturally have these extensions as part of our lives? Is that going to extend the storytelling and the experience so we have a multi-dimensional, not just a multiverse, but I guess it's a multi-dimensional multiverse as we're walking through our day-to-day lives?
Right. Yeah. And increasingly, that's what's going to happen. Excuse me. And increasingly is happening, again, because of the smartphone, that we're taking this with us wherever we go, that allows us to drop into virtuality no matter where we are in reality. And, I always tell people, though, that what I wrote about in the Infinite Possibility, the multiverse framework, is not a plea to abandon reality, because reality will now and forevermore provide the richest of experiences. It comes automatically 3D. You don't have to put glasses on. You get high fidelity sound. You get the richness of things. But yet, what digital technology does is it does allow us to create new and wondrous experiences that have never before been envisioned, engendered, nor encountered. Today, thanks to digital technology, we are limited only by our imagination, and of that there is no end.
So if you were going to offer companies a 1 point of something they should focus on and really think about for themselves in the immediate future, what would you say to them?
Well, the one thing that occurs to me is getting away from the digital technology a little bit, though, is if one thing to ask yourself is, what business are you really in? Right? What business are you really in? Are you in the commodities business, in which case you're charging for undifferentiated stuff? Are you in the goods business where you're charging for tangible things? Are you in the services business where you're charging for the activities your people perform? Or are you in the experience business, where what you need to do is actually charge for the time your customers spend with you? Each one of those comes with a different mindset, comes with different possibilities. But what's clear is that the growth in the future in both employment and GDP is going to come in experiences as goods and services commoditize.
Okay. And so it sounds like do you think that every commodity business should in fact become an experience business? And I use the word should. I mean,
right. Should, no. No, actually, I don't think every commodity business, I don't think every commodity business needs to, in that sense, is that there's always a choice. And when an industry commoditizes, there's always one or two companies that can make the most money then, because they're the ones that can figure out totally focus on low cost, get rid of many people as possible, automate as much as possible, and they may be able to very well make that a success. But for most companies, in most situations, they're absolutely going to gain a huge benefit by thinking about going beyond that and really embracing experiences in the essence of what they're doing as a company.
Okay, wonderful. Very helpful thinking about that, because I know some people think like, oh my God, they might walk away thinking, my God, I have to become an experience economy company. What do I do? And I think it's important to acknowledge, know who you are and be who you are. And that's okay.
Exactly. In fact, in this progression of economic value, we talk about a number of dynamics. You got the dynamic of commoditization, but you also have the dynamic of commodification, where you are turning something that wasn't an offering into an offering. So you can always innovate on commodities. You can't actually innovate an actual commodity, but you can innovate how you extract that commodity, how you find that commodity. You can innovate in goods. And we're going to talk a lot about our Think About event this fall in Atlanta on September 30th and October 1st, about innovating in goods, in fact, about a technique we call ing the thing. The first principle of experience staging is ing your things. Focus on the using of the goods, and then you'll create an experience out of those goods, basically experientializing them. And that's something you can do as a manufacturer. In service activities, how do you better deliver the services, and that can be important. And then finally, staging an experience. And that's what the economic function is, staging. And then the third dynamic, as we mentioned, is that customization as the antidote to commoditization. So how do you do that? So there's many ways that companies can think about innovating to create greater economic value for their business.
Perfect. Joe, we've come to the end of our time together. Thank you so much for everything. I have one last question for you. Sure. How do you define innovation?
Innovation is something new, something that no company has ever done that actually makes it into the marketplace. There's a lot of inventions that never actually make it into an economic offering. An offering is something that a company where somebody's willing to pay money for the offering that you have. So whether in how you produce that offering, process innovation, or offering innovation itself, it's something new that makes it into the marketplace.
Wonderful. Joe, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Lamar. I appreciate the opportunity.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us for more shows about the IN Network and IN Live, and learning more about the who, what, how, and wow of innovation. We look forward to seeing you next time real soon.